today we'll start with the new module, that is module number 5, which is related to documentation in clinical trials. Okay. So first we'll start at IMPD. IMPD is also known as Investigational Medicinal Product Dossier in European Union, and it is known as Investigational New Drug Application, Investigational New Drug Application in US. So now medical writing for clinical trials. So the ICH guidelines, particularly ICH E6, describe the essential documents required to proceed through the clinical life cycle and meet regulatory requirements. Okay, so the ICH guidelines, specifically the ICH E6 guidelines. So ICH E6 guidelines are ICH GCP guidelines. Okay, so according to ICH GCP, there are various documents which are made during the clinical trial process, but not all the documents are made by the medical writer. Some documents are made by the regulatory affairs managers, then some documents are made by clinical data management team. Some documents are made by the biostatistician, but there are then other documents are made by the medical writer, and with other departments also, sometimes the medical writers are involved. Okay, so according to ICH GCP, there are 5 essential documents. 5 essential documents of clinical trials is the clinical study protocol, okay, informed consent form, investigators brochure, and clinical study report, and case record form. Okay, so in that there are 4 documents, that is the clinical study report, clinical study report, clinical trial protocol, and investigators brochure, and informed consent form. These 4 documents are made by the medical writer, and the one document which is CRF, that is not made by the medical writer, that is made by the clinical data management team. So all these 4 essential documents we will be discussing in this class. Okay, so ICH guidelines, particularly ICH E6, describe the essential documents required to proceed through the clinical life cycle and meet regulatory requirements, and it is accepted by European Union, US, and Japan. So the documents which we used to study in clinical trials, so that we can divide into 3 stages, that is documentation required to start a clinical trial process, documentation which is used during the conduct of a clinical trial process, and documentation which is done after the completion or termination of the clinical trial process. First, we'll discuss about the documentation which is required to start a clinical trial process or before the initiation of clinical trial process. So first is the Investigational New Drug Application, IND, or Investigational Medicinal Product Dossier, IMPD. So IND and IMPD. So IMPD, it is known as IMPD in European Union, and in India and in US it is known as Investigational New Drug Application, IND. So IND or IMPD, it is an application for the permission to use an investigational product in a clinical trial with human subjects. So this is a document which is used for filing after preclinical studies are completed. Then IND application is filed to the regulatory authorities to get permission to conduct clinical trial on humans. Okay, so for that, now in case of IND form number, FDA form number 1576 is submitted. Okay, along with this form, there are certain other documents also required. Like first is the preclinical study report. So along with the application form, preclinical study report is also required. Okay, and this preclinical study report is also required, and this preclinical study report, all the documents related to the studies which are conducted, what are the results which are obtained, okay, how the studies were conducted, on what species the studies conducted, and what are the significant findings from the preclinical testings, and what are the adverse effects specifically. So relevant details related to that is submitted. Then next is the investigator's brochure. And along with the IND, along with the preclinical studies, the 3 other documents, that is the clinical trial protocol, investigator's brochure, and informed consent form is also submitted with the regulatory authority to the regulatory authority, so that they can understand that how the clinical trial process will be conducted in the human participants. Okay. Then next after that, there is the clinical trials. Means if the drug is not an entirely a new chemical entity and it is already there in a market. So, but now the drug is to be introduced with any new indication or any with new route of administration of, if there are any changes, then in that case, the IND which is submitted. So in that case, when previously the clinical trials were conducted, so what are the important findings from the clinical trials? So that what are the important findings from the clinical trial? So that is submitted to the regulatory authorities. Okay. Then after that, there are the qualification documents, like what is the qualification of the investigator, how much qualified he or she is, what is the training and experience they have, so that they can fulfill that, just to ensure that they can fulfill the responsibilities related to clinical trial process. And then one more document or one more submission which is required, that is related to the manufacturing processes, that how the manufacturing process will be conducted. So this information is required to understand that whether the manufacturer is equipped enough to process the drug or to manufacture the drug in bulk when the drug is approved for marketing. So that is the IND or so that is the documents which are required to submit it with IND. For IMPD, we will discuss later. The next document is which is required to start a clinical trial process, that is the investigator's brochure. So investigator's brochure is what? It is a compilation of all the relevant clinical and medicinal data of an investigational new drug or medicinal product as relevant when studying the medicine in human subjects, lay out clearly the scientific information available about the product. So this we have already discussed, that investigator's brochure contains all the information about the investigational product, and it contains all the pharmacological, pharmaceutical, and medicinal properties and all other properties of the drug, how the drug can be used, what are the adverse events, what are the information which is collected from the non-clinical data, like from the non-clinical studies which are conducted, and also any information which is available from the human data. So all that information is submitted in the investigator's brochure, written in the investigator's brochure, and investigator's brochure is subjected to investigator's brochure. It is subjected to the investigator, so that they can understand that what the drug is about. Okay, what is the drug, what is its different properties, how the drug can be used. In case if any adverse effect occurs, then what can be the best medical management, what is the best medical management which can be provided to the participant. So that information is shared in the investigator's brochure. The next document is clinical study protocol. So clinical study protocol is a document that lays out strict guidelines for the performance of a clinical trial based on the most current data about the disease under treatment and the medicine being tested. The protocol lays out guidelines for diagnosis, prognosis, handling of subjects, doses of medicines, and risk-benefit considerations, providing decision options and their expected outcomes. Explain the rationale for performing each study, provide a detailed investigational plan, and describe the analysis to be made to achieve the objectives of a study. So clinical study protocol is what? It is a document in which all the guidelines related to like how the clinical trial process will be conducted, the information about the disease, background of the disease, what is the hypothesis behind doing the disease, all the guidelines for which are used for diagnosis, prognosis, how the subjects will be handled, what is the inclusion and exclusion criteria for the recruitment of the participants, what is the study design, what is the procedure to be followed. Each visit is described clearly what will happen in each visit. Okay, how the statistical analysis will be performed. So all that information, so we can say the investigational plan or the study plan is mentioned in the clinical study protocol, and according to that plan only the clinical study will be conducted. The next document is ICF, that is informed consent form. So informed consent form is a document to be signed by all subjects who are to take part in the clinical trial to confirm that they understand and accept the objectives, methods, and risks involved, explain the details and intention of the trial in lay language for subjects participating in the trial. So informed consent form is a document which is submitted, which contains all the information related to the clinical trial process, specifically the information which is related to the risk and benefit which is involved if the participant decide to participate in the clinical trial process. Okay, so in this, the objective, what are the methods which is to be followed, what are the risks involved, so that if that all information is provided to the participants, so that they can decide on the basis of the information which is shared with them that whether they want to participate in the clinical trial process or not. Okay, and informed consent form, it is written in a very simple, easy language so that the subjects who are participating in the trial, they can understand it. So generally by the medical writer, the informed consent form, it is written in English only. But in our country, we are Hindi speaking country. So in that case, by the medical writer, the informed consent form, it is written in English, and then after that it is translated into Hindi by a qualified translator. Okay, and by the qualified translator, and then after that the test is, and then after that what happens, suppose if in our state we have the regional languages also, in our country we have regional languages also. So in case if the study is conducted in the state of Maharashtra, then the same informed consent form is translated into Marathi as well. So in case if any participant does not understand English, neither English nor Hindi, so that they can translate, so that they can understand the form in Marathi. The next is pediatric study plan, or PSP or PIP, pediatric study plan or pediatric investigational plan. So it is a development plan that is required if the investigational product is to be licensed for use in children. It describes how clinical data will be obtained safely in clinical studies with children. So PIP or PSP, it is a development plan. It contains all the information related to the trials which are to be conducted on children. Okay, so for children, apart from the protocol, this is, and you can call it as an exploratory protocol or a pediatric study plan or pediatric investigational plan. So in that, all the details about that, how the study will be conducted on pediatrics, if there is any waiver which is possible or not. Okay, so that all information is provided and it is submitted to the regulatory authority, so that this document, so that by going through that document, the regulatory authority will grant permission to conduct the study on pediatric population. Okay, so this document is generally made by the regulatory affairs team. Basically, rarely the medical writers are involved in making this document. The next is the documentation which is required during the conduct of the clinical trial, means once the clinical trial started. So after that, what are the documents which are required? So first is the DSUR, which is Development Safety Update Report, DSUR. So DSUR is a comprehensive annual review and information of safety and review and evaluation of safety information relating to drugs under development, which must be revised annually as necessary. So DSUR is an annual safety report, or you can call it as an aggregate report also. It comes under the category of aggregate report. And this is a report which is made once the clinical trial started. So this report is submitted annually. So sometimes what happens, there are certain clinical trials which are extended up to 2 to 3 years or more than that. So in that case, an annual report is submitted to the regulatory authority about the progress of the clinical trial process and all other information which is obtained from various other sources, and also the information related to the adverse event which occurred during the clinical trial process. So the list of all those adverse events are provided, and the main aim of submitting this document to the regulatory authorities, so that on the basis of the information which is shared with them in these reports, it can be decided, like they can analyze the risk and benefits which are associated with the use of the drug, and on the basis of that analysis, they can decide whether they have to stop the clinical trial process in between or terminate the clinical trial process because too many adverse events are reported. It is not good for the participants, or maybe the desired objectives are not still achieved and the drug is not behaving it is expected to be. So they can terminate the clinical trial process, or they can pause or stop the clinical trial process. They can ask for some queries. When these queries are resolved, then the clinical trial process will again resume, or they will grant permission to continue with the clinical trial process if everything is normal. The next is clinical study protocol amendment, that is CSP amendment. So revisions to the original CSP that reflect changes in the design or investigational plan. Example, due to practical problems in running the study or unexpected outcomes. So now the revisions to the original CSP or clinical study protocol, if there are any revisions, like when initially when the protocol was designed, so the study was just a hypothesis. But when actually the study starts, there are various practical problem which investigators come across. Sometimes, for example, it is related to the dose which is decided at that the desired effects are not seen. So maybe the dose needs to increase, or maybe the adverse effects are seen. So the investigators, they decide to decrease the dose. So that means after the commencement of the clinical trial process, the dose is to be changed. Okay. So now if the dose is to be changed, then it should also be reported or amended in the protocol. So in that case, if it is not an emergency condition, so in that case, the clinical trial process will be stopped in between. The change which is proposed, that will be reflected in the protocol, the amended protocol, then that amended protocol along with the old protocol is submitted to the regulatory authority. A justification for the change is also provided. Then the regulatory authority, the ethics committee, they will go through the documents that change and all explanation is required. And then after that, when they grant permission, again, when they approve the protocol, then again the clinical trial process will start. Okay. But in the emergency situation, when clinical trial process cannot be stopped, so in that case, that particular change is notified to the ethics committee or to the regulatory authority, but the clinical trial process will not stop. That will be in continuation. And but after some time, a proper documentation amended protocol is submitted to the ethics committee with the reason that because it is an emergency situation. So hence this clinical trial process cannot be started. It has to be continued. But these are the changes. So the ethics committee side by side parallelly can approve the changes also. And when the file is made, so all the protocols, like the original protocol as well as the amended protocols, are to be kept. It is not like this that the older protocol will become obsolete. No, you have to keep all the copies of the protocol original as well as all the amended copies of the protocol are to be made, along with the justified reason that why this protocol is being amended, what are the changes which are introduced. Okay. The next is investigators brochure update. So investigators brochure update is, that is, prior to the start of new clinical trial, the investigators brochure must be updated with any data from prior studies. At a minimum, updates are required at least annually to reflect any changed information. So investigators brochure is also updated annually because there are any information like related to the adverse effects which are seen during the clinical trial process once it is started. So it needs to be noted, it needs to be present, it needs to be updated in the investigators brochure. Or sometimes what happens, there are any information which comes up from the marketing experience or from the other clinical trials which are being conducted, or the information is sometimes from the literature reviews and all. So if any of the source, any significant information which may affect the therapeutic effect of the drug or risk and benefit of the drug, so in that case, that change needs to be updated in the investigator brochure. So that updation is also done by the medical writer during the clinical trial process. So generally it is recommended that annually, because annually means in 1 year time, there are many things which comes up related to the clinical trial process. So in that case, that needs to be updated. Okay. Understood, everyone? Is it clear? The next is the pregnancy prevention plan or pregnancy prevention program. So it is known as pregnancy prevention plan is in US, and it is the same document is named as pregnancy prevention program in European Union. So this is a document laying out a set of interventions intended to reduce the likelihood of pregnancy during treatment with a medicinal product with known or potential teratogenic effect. Okay, so now this is a document which is generally prepared in case of the drug for which it is known that the drug will have the teratogenic effect. And so in that case, if the females are recruited in the study, so first the pregnancy test of the females will be conducted to confirm that they are not pregnant. A proper counseling is provided to them so that they can understand that what precautions they should take during the clinical trial process so that they do not become pregnant, or how they can avoid any kind of unplanned pregnancy. If they are planning to get pregnant, then they should not participate in the clinical trial process. In case if they are not planning to get pregnant, so what are the precautions or what are the contraceptive methods they can take to avoid that unplanned pregnancy? And also time to time, like after 1 month and after 2 months, the pregnancy test is repeated again so that it can be confirmed that the female participant is not pregnant. In case if the female participant becomes pregnant during the clinical trial process, then in that case immediately their participation will be discontinued. The decision can be taken by the investigator. Okay, and then after that, after the discontinuation from the study, there a proper follow-up for the participant is done till she give birth to the fetus, to the baby, and then after that the proper examination of the fetus baby is also done to check that is there any teratogenic effect or any teratogenic effect is there in the female, in that newborn baby or not. Okay, so this is not a very complex type of a document. It is a very simple document which is generally made by the regulatory affairs department only, so, or by the medical writer also. And in that only, that what are the contraceptions which is to be used, what are the precautions which will be taken, what is the teratogenic effect, how that teratogenic effect can affect adversely the fetus and all. So what is the risk which is associated with the use of those such drugs in pregnant women. So all that information is given in the pregnancy prevention plan. A proper counseling is also provided to the females so that they can understand about teratogenicity, and also in case if they are interested to take part in the clinical trial process. So during the clinical trial process also, and at least after like 1 or 2 months also, after when their clinical trial process is stopped, their participation is no more required, then after 1 to 2 months also, they should not plan for a baby. After that they can go for it. Okay, so that's a pregnancy prevention plan or program. The next is SAP, statistical analysis plan. So statistical analysis plan is a detailed description of the statistical analysis to be performed on the data collected during the clinical trial based on the statistical analysis described in the CSP. This includes the rationale and references for why particular statistical methods are appropriate for the planned analysis. Okay, so statistical analysis plan, it is a detailed description of the statistical analysis, like how it will be conducted on the data, which is how the statistical analysis will be performed on the data which is collected during the clinical trial process. And this statistical analysis plan is a detailed plan which is made on the basis of the information regarding the statistical analysis provided in the CSP. Okay, so now so that statistical analysis plan is not made by the medical writer, it is made by the biostatistician, and sometimes only the administrative information it is required to be written by the medical writer, but generally that information can taken from the protocol and it is copied and pasted as it is from the protocol. So for making the statistical analysis plan, the medical writers are not required, that is made by the biostatistician. There's a biostatistician in the team, so that biostatistician is responsible, and sometimes along with the data management team, they are responsible for preparing the statistical analysis plan. The documentation which is required after completion or termination of a clinical trial process. Okay, so first is the clinical study report. Clinical study report is a mandatory report covering the objectives, conduct, and outcomes of the clinical trial. Okay, so clinical study report is a report which is made after the completion or termination of the clinical trial process, which contains all the information about the clinical trial process, like how the clinical trial process was conducted, what are the procedures which are followed, what is actually done during the clinical trial process, the significant steps are described, how the ethical considerations, like what are the guidelines which are followed, and what is the study design which is followed, how the outcome is achieved, how it is analyzed, and then after that, what is the result which is obtained, and overall discussion on the result is provided in the clinical study report. Okay, so that is the report which is made by the medical writer. Then CTS is the clinical trial summary. Clinical trial summary is the summary of a CSR, including a summary understandable to a lay person, to be uploaded onto a publicly available clinical trial registry. Example, www.clinicaltrials.gov in the US or www.clinicaltrialsregister.eu in the European Union. Okay, so clinical trial summary is the summary. It is nothing but just the summary of the clinical study report, and that summary is submitted to the clinical trial registry so that the information can be uploaded under the registration number of that clinical trial. So all the clinical trials are registered in India and US and on www.clinicaltrials.gov, and in European Union it is registered with clinicaltrialsregister.eu. Okay, so these are the various documents which are made by the medical writer during the clinical trial process, means before the initiation of the clinical trial process, during the clinical trial process when they are going on, and after the completion of the clinical trial process. And now we will discuss the documents which are made by the medical writer in detail. First, IND we have already discussed. Now we will discuss about the Investigational Medicinal Product Dossier, IMPD, which is required in European Union. An investigational medicinal product, IMP, that is intended for marketing in the European Union is described in the Investigational Medicinal Product Dossier, IMPD. It includes various summaries of data pertaining to the development stage of the product, data from non-clinical trials, and from its clinical use, the data on the quality, production, and control of the IMP, including reference product and or placebo. Okay, so investigational medicinal product dossier, it contains summaries of the data which is related to the development stage of the product. Means it contains the data from the non-clinical trials, that is from the non-clinical studies, and from its clinical use, if the drug is already available in the market, or any information which is available from about the drug from its marketing use, and related to the quality, data quality, production, how the production or manufacturing of the investigational product will be done, including the references product and or the placebo. So all that information is provided in IMPD, that is submitted in European Union. Sections and requirements of IMPD. IMPD is broken down into 4 sections, each of which provides a concise summary of the relevant details on high quality preclinical and clinical studies. So IMPD is now it is divided into 4 sections, and each section will provide you with the summary of a relevant detail on high quality preclinical and on the clinical studies. And all these sections also include the critical analysis of the clinical and non-clinical data, which is related to the potential risk. So now it is divided into 4 sections, and in each section, the summary related to the preclinical studies and the clinical studies will be provided. These sections also include critical analysis of the non-clinical and clinical data related to potential risks and benefits of the proposed study, as well as any previously generated human data that may be available at an evaluation of the overall risk or benefit. Okay, so now these sections, they also include the critical analysis of the clinical and non-clinical data, which is related to the potential risk, where you have to understand about the potential risk and the benefits which are there of the study. Okay, and any from the previous use, if any previously generated human data, any data which is available, and on the basis of that, overall risk and benefit analysis can be presented. So that information is provided. The material is logically organized and often follows the headings of the common technical document, with the amount of information contained depending on a number of variables, including the type of product, the indication, and the stage of development. So now all the documents that all the related documents which are submitted along with in the IMPD, so they are the same as which is submitted during the clinical in the common technical document. So common technical document we will discuss when we will. So common technical document we will discuss when we will be discussing about the documents which are required for post-marketing authorization or for marketing authorization, that is in module number 6. Then you will understand that what are the documents which are required for in the common technical document dossier, but it contains the information about that what is the type of product. Now the information may also vary depending upon that what is that type of product, in what indication the product is to be used, and what is the stage of development. Then, however, there are extra data requirements for important biopharmaceutical goods like vaccines, antibodies, and advanced therapy medicinal products. Okay, so now there are various other documents are also required, or additional information may be required for the biopharmaceutical goods or biological goods, that is like vaccines, antibodies, and advanced therapy medicinal products which are developed using the biotechnological methods. Okay, understood? Is it clear to everyone?